Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you get something out of today's episode. And we have a pretty fun guest today. You know his name, you know his face. Welcome, Jack Mandaville, to the show.
Jack Mandaville.
That's not a guarantee that they know either of those things.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
It's a guarantee.
They must.
They have to. If they're a fan of the show, they've seen you several times on this
I know.
podcast.
Did the last one, 4 or 5 years ago?
I don't think
3, 4 years ago?
Probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Been 3?
Might have been 3.
God.
Ever since, it's cliche at this point, but COVID completely messed up our perception of time.
Perception of time, and
Yeah.
just our ability to connect with humans, and everybody was so sick. It was disgusting this year.
It's like it's the one thing the entire world gets to share together. Like when everybody says back during the pandemic, it's like being at a VFW, like talking about, being in Quezon or something like that. Everybody can get on the same page about it just sucked.
Back in the war.
Back in the pandemic.
It was, and now everybody's got this RSV that's going around and getting pneumonia. It's just a mess.
The only people who got sick, though, if you've noticed this, are the people who had vaccines. I'm just saying.
I had something a couple weeks ago. I got vaxxed. I wanted to go to Europe, so they're like, "You gotta get vaxxed." I'm like, "Okay, I don't care."
Yeah.
I smoke cigarettes every single day since I was 15. So.
There's such information out there. How do we know it's true? One of which is nicotine now. Is healthy for you. Like people are saying this, and you're
neuroprotective.
Like, what?
Who, big tobacco? As a smoker, I can say that's not true.
The same people.
By the way, sorry if I smell like cigarettes, guys.
No, you're good. You're good. That's hilarious. Well, let's rewind it back a little bit and just kind of do a recap. What have you been doing for the last couple of years?
Oh man, in sketch comedy, writing comedy, sometimes performing comedy live. I used to do those AFE USO show deals till the pandemic. And geez Louise, I've gotten behind the camera a little more, producing not just sketch comedy, but been doing some short documentaries and feature-length documentaries, directing, producing, all that good stuff. Yeah. Basically just getting World War II veterans to talk about the worst days of their lives. Yeah.
Which is really important. I mean, we're trying to do that too. Obviously, it gets harder and harder with the age, right?
Yeah.
And how do you capture that as well? And who wants to talk about it? That's another thing. Prior to Vietnam, really Vietnam and prior, no one's talking about it.
Some of them. It's a weird thing I've noticed, and this isn't all of them, but because there's not a lot of them left. But I've noticed that a lot of these guys who didn't say a word to anybody for years about their war experience, they realize now they're the last person in their unit. They're the last person, not just in their company. They're the last person in their battalion. They're the last person alive in their regiment. Yeah. And I have interviewed a couple guys that it wasn't until their 80s and 90s that they said, I'm the only one left. I got to tell our story because no one else is going to know about what we did over there. So they're telling these stories, not for themselves and not even just for their families, but they realize they're the last ones of the guys they served with, and they feel this responsibility to get their experiences out there.
Yeah, it's understandable. I mean, it's important for humanity, Yeah. If we don't stop and collate these stories and listen and understand, like everyone knows, we're doomed to repeat it all over again, right?
Yeah, and
seen it time and time again.
We all know Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. We all know, hey, they got a lot of guys to go on the record about that. That's great. That's not normal. The majority of those other paratrooper units and just every branch and every theater of war, most of them didn't get those stories out at a high rate.
Yeah, and even Band of Brothers, I think a lot of them were very successful after the war as well. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah.
Comment from my pillow. They were writing books and very, very successful careers.
Started businesses, or were just generally happy in life.
Which doesn't happen, as we know, right? I mean, we see this during the global war, right? Global war on terrorism, I should say, can't compare it to World War II global war, right?
No.
But same thing is a lot of people just kind of go back into their everyday lives and just fall off the map and be reclusive. Pandemic doesn't help,
No.
right? We talked about that a little bit too. So the isolation factor just emphasized quite drastically.
Yeah. We're lucky we come from a generation where we have social media and we can keep in contact with each other. I've thought too that, the global war on terrorism generation from 01 to 21, 22, we also are a product of our generation in general. Most of us are millennials. There's probably a little Gen Z in there as well. Generationally, we have our own unique things that are different from our grandparents' generation. That we have our own obstacles.
Yeah.
We grew up a lot more desensitized to violence, playing Grand Theft Auto and all that.
Yes.
And on pills and everything like that. That before we even joined the service.
Yeah.
I mean, we come from. If the World War II generation was the greatest generation, we're the most anxiety-riddled generation, and the war doesn't even have to do with that.
Yeah.
That is true, and I was kind of watching a clip the other day where this lady was talking to her therapist about, she's like, I'm journaling, I'm meditating, I'm doing all these things, but my anxiety is not getting any better.
Right.
Right.
And World War II, they had it too. We forget those guys were not only were they the greatest generation, they were the most alcoholic generation. Like
That is true.
they came back, they didn't say anything. I'm like, yeah, because they were all drunk.
Yeah,
Like
flush it down
constantly.
with some brown.
Yeah, and we see even that dynamic changing. Really, like alcohol has a different relationship.
Yeah,
Significantly reduced in most people these days.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not just the war veterans that came back from Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a generational thing. There's less a lot more people are doing psilocybin now, which our grandparents would have never thought to do something like that.
Yeah,
True,
yeah. Or they were, you're going through the Reagan administration where it's just like the war on drugs and
Right.
it's just complete propaganda, right?
Right.
Yeah, your
Stuff-
brain on
They were,
drugs.
yeah,
your, your brain is bleeding if you take mushrooms.
right, right. Yeah, cannabis and heroin, they're pretty much the same thing. Like, wait.
Gateway
Pump the
drug.
brakes
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
As they're sucking down their cigarettes and their alcohol, right?
Yeah, and there's Xanax and
Yeah.
there's,
So
Adderall.
you are a huge fan of history.
Yes. Always have been.
So you talked about kind of that generational differences as well. So you've talked to several World War II veterans,
Yeah.
Vietnam veterans,
Yeah.
GWAT veterans.
Yep.
Can you tell, like a little compare and contrast, some of the differences you see, some of those philosophies, those mentalities that are much different between those generations?
I think it starts in childhood. A lot of these World War II, I've talked to, I think maybe at this point 8 to 10 on camera, 8 to 10 World War II veterans, and
Nice.
one of the common denominators with all them is before they even joined the service. And everyone's heard this before. You've seen it on Band of Brothers, but it's real. It's not. It's they all. Each one of them has a story about growing up in the Depression.
Yeah.
One guy I talked to grew up in Appalachia. He didn't have a pair of shoes until he joined the service.
Damn.
And that whole I had to walk 6 miles in snow with no shoes on. Like that was real.
Yeah, legit.
Yeah.
Man.
And
And we bitch that it's 69 degrees in the house.
right, yeah. Or our electricity bill's going up. Yeah, I'm like, we have electricity.
I can only run the sprinklers twice this week.
Right.
Damn
Yeah.
water shortage.
Yeah. So I think from the get go, those World War II guys, they just were conditioned. I'm not saying they were tougher than we were, but they were conditioned for toughness
Yeah.
better. Yeah, they're, and again, I'm talking to men that are, I don't think I've talked to someone younger than 95 in the last couple of years. So, they're naturally slower and, but they, it's not even like what's different about them. It's how many similarities I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys I interviewed was clearly going through early memory problems, and I was having a hard time. He was in. He flew 27 missions on a bomber, got shot down. Ended up in Sweden, which was a neutral country. So they basically gave anybody that was shot down and landed in Sweden. The Swedes would hold you captive, but they would just give you civilian clothes and tell you you're not allowed to leave the country. So you had Germans and Americans. You know, you had like Allied soldiers and Axis soldiers who were like living right down the street from each other, but they were just like, you guys, the war's over here. Here's some civilian clothes. Go enjoy Stockholm. But this guy, like 27 missions, and I was having a hard time pulling those memories from him. And it wasn't because he was like scarred. It was just those memories were fading, but he kept going back to all the chicks he banged in Europe. Like, he couldn't shut up about it. Like, we could have taken the raw footage of that and done a 30-minute documentary of all the ass this guy was getting around Europe.
That's what he's talking about the whole time.
The whole time he just kept bringing up like his girlfriends in Sweden
was good, but
Britain and
I had a great time in the war.
all his wife's been dead for like 10 years. All he could think about. Am I allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah.
All he could think about was the pussy back in the 40s.
So funny.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But it's like, that's our generation. We all wanted the same things as these guys did.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That is absolutely interesting, though. So Sweden.
Yeah.
Like, did you dive into that a little bit on what that looked like?
A little bit.
It's the first time hearing of that.
Yeah. So so Sweden was a neutral country. They stayed out of the war. We always think of Switzerland when we think of neutral countries. Sweden was in the same boat. But what would happen, because these air battles and naval battles were happening so close to the Swedish border, a lot of the time these what happened to his plane was they got shot up so bad they knew they weren't going to make it back to Britain. They didn't want to fly back through Germany because they were just going to be obliterated on the way back. So the pilot decided to, hey, let's ditch the guns, let's ditch the ammo, let's make this as light as possible. I think we can make it into Sweden. Sure enough, they crash land in Sweden. The Swedish army comes out. It sounded like they were very polite with them, but they're like, you need to give us your guns. Your
chocolate shop.
Yeah, you belong to us now. But like he said, 27 missions, and he got to spend the last 3 or 6 months of the war just going out to the bar every night and banging Swedish chicks. And the only rules was you can't try to leave and you can't fight the Germans that are here.
Fair enough.
Everybody was okay with it. They're like, yep, war's done for us.
That's a fantastic POW camp right there.
Yeah, and it's they were legally speaking interned.
Okay.
So they weren't POWs, they were interned.
Okay.
So Sweden knew as soon as the war was over, they were going to send everybody back home.
So were they like assigned to families and stuff then?
I think they had like barracks.
Okay. Yeah.
So the Americans would be in one barracks, the Germans would be in one, the British would be in one barracks.
I wonder if you
So
did
interesting.
some digging, you could find, playing some football or soccer together. Like
I'm sure.
I don't know.
I'm sure there's no way
gotta
they
be.
didn't run into each other in one way or another socially.
How much of a mind, just a mind fuck would that be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
These people tried killing me a few months ago.
But everybody knows who's served that the enemy is not as extreme as you've been trained to believe.
Yeah.
Yes, that's something I've realized 20 years later. Those guys wanted the same things I did.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's one man's
To be left
man's
alone,
terrorist
right?
is another man's freedom fighter, right?
Yeah.
Like we recognize that. So like imagine that when we take away the knives, take away the guns, and say, hey, we got to get along.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Well, I mean,
We're going to
Sounds
realize
like they
how
got
human
along.
you are. Yeah.
there's that famous story from World War I, even during the trench warfare, where they had wolves killing so many people. The Russians, the Germans, and the Americans. The wolves were killing so many people, they had a ceasefire for like 2 weeks. So they could band together and go kill all the wolves
Just
they were
show
all
a little humanity and
like, hey guys, we're all being slaughtered by the wolves. Let's band up real quick, take these guys out, and go back to fighting. It was like 10 days where they had no fighting. They banded together.
Yeah.
So it makes
And
sense.
we'll get back to the war. We got to deal with this situation.
Yeah, we're all gonna die otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just.
It's what I've been deep diving on lately is like the history of Canadian war crimes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
On the Allied side, in both world wars, Canadians did the most war crimes.
Yeah.
They did crazy stuff. Yeah. Really like dark manipulative stuff. Like,
Really? Let's hear about it.
one of the things they did in World War I was they threw a bunch of chocolates into the German trenches, and the Germans got so excited and really softened them up. And the Germans were like, oh, they're being really cool to us. And then so the Germans like let down their guard, and they started screaming like, do you have more chocolate and stuff? And the Canadians threw grenades into the thing. They do manipulative mind F stuff like that.
Wow.
Now, technically, is that a war crime? It doesn't sound like a war crime to me.
I don't
It
know.
sounds like strategy.
During the Normandy invasion, the Brits did gold and sword. the U.S. did Utah and Omaha.
Yeah.
And the Canadians had Juneau. And afterwards, when the Brits and the Americans were done, everyone's getting together like, hey, so what's your POW count? How many people did you capture? And the Brits and the Americans are tallying, we captured this many. And the Canadians are like, what are you talking about?
Capture.
POWs.
Yes.
We all captured. A lot of people gave up.
That's right. Yeah.
And they're like, don't know what a POW is. Hey, Canada, why are there a bunch of dudes in a pile over there with gunshots in the back of their heads?
Oh, no.
They were like that when
Yeah.
we got there.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
Yeah.
When I was at the 80th anniversary of Normandy, I learned about that there was no prisoners of war.
Not for the Canadians. Yeah.
What
We
do you
just
mean
think about
taxes?
these nice, happy maple syrup drinking
Yeah.
people. And I'm like, oh, no, they were really pissed off to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Canadian war crimes.
Yeah.
like wacky times, and there's like those little stories. That's the stuff we got to remember,
Right. And it's just like when we romanticize, for many reasons, we should romanticize the World War II generations, but we also forget, like, they did some gnarly things that we would never think to do. I'm not trying to knock that generation, but, like, they were pretty rapey, statistically speaking.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it was more of a time of barbarism,
A lot closer than it was for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean-
well, think about who they were raised by and think about who those people were raised by, right?
Right.
If they grew up in the Depression, that means their parents were likely born in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
1870 through 1890, whose parents were probably born in the 1850s.
Who experienced the Civil War.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The hardest people you could, that's who they were raised by.
Yeah.
And so you got to take those considerations. Like, we're only 2 steps removed from that.
Our
Yeah,
grandchildren
it is.
will look at us as barbarians.
100%.
That's the
And it
evolution
is.
of the world.
100%.
We're like I often think about this too. Is in the future generations are going to look at us and be like, man, those guys were freaking like horrible human beings. Like that they were the freaking the Homo sapiens, right?
We're like, no, we were better than our grandparents' generation.
I swear.
We had way more empathy.
And I'm sure you know, like in comparison, in the 1900s to 2000s, like we still had some horrendous stuff going on in the war.
Yeah.
World. Like like empires were still
Yeah.
just horrible dictatorships and. Yeah, so I think we're definitely coming out of that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we would ever have a World War III like that, like World War II, It's not going to be, D-Day. It's not going to be that.
No. It'll be done with drones and
Cyber and
naval warfare and everything. Yeah.
Or there's so many jammers on the field and everyone's technologically equivalent within a sense that it'll be trench warfare all over again. There's just no technology.
Which is what's happening in Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah. We're looking at trench warfare again. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we'd like to think that we're getting better, but
No,
also
the technology is. We're still the same as human beings.
there's more slavery today than at the height of the Roman Empire.
Oh, really? Oh,
Today.
like sex trafficking and everything like that.
In the world today, there's more slavery today than at the height of the Roman Empire, which was, one of the most influential things that we talk about when we bring that topic up. So I think we're trying to get better. Some people are getting better, but other people are maintaining it.
Yeah.
Perpetuating that.
And there's a good point too. Is I think Rogan says this is that the apocalypse is happening right now for some people.
Right.
Some
it's
parts
always
of the
been
world.
happening for some people at any given time. If you were a English priest sitting in your little chapel on the coast of England and a group of Vikings showed up in their ship,
Yeah.
and their ship, that's your apocalypse. You're done for.
That's it.
The world is done to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point too. So it's not this whole extinction level event where we're seeing an asteroid come and blow the entire world up, right? It's isolated incidents. It's the cobalt mines and babies on the back while we're swinging pickaxes. Like that is horrendous stuff that's still happening today.
We take for granted this country. We do have we got a mass shooting problem. We got issues here, but we really take for granted how relatively safe we are compared to other parts of the world.
Well,
Absolutely.
I mean, look what happened last night with the plane, right?
Right.
The Black Hawk running into the plane.
I don't
here.
recall anything like that ever happening in my lifetime.
Yeah, that's horrendous, you know.
Yeah.
And 67, I think, people were killed. You know, but at the end of the day, those numbers, you know, are nothing compared to some other parts of the world where mass genocides are happening.
Try flying commercially in Russia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
Flying commercially in Africa, like within the
Oh,
continent.
yeah.
If you're flying in and out of the continent, it's one thing. You're on Lufthansa, you're on United.
Yeah.
If you're flying within the country,
If you're going from Chad to Zimbabwe,
yes. Yeah, flying internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bumpy ride, and you're just loading on from the side of the airport. You just walk right on. Yeah, interesting.
which is crazy because as far as air travel terrorism, it's not a thing out there.
Not too common.
And they don't have TSA.
Not really.
Yeah.
Not the same way. Yeah. The mid-air collision is pretty devastating, though. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely devastating. We still got a long way to go as humanity.
We'll never perfect this thing.
Yeah.
Because we're humans.
Yeah.
We're always going to be bitter or angry about something. We're always going to be.
It's just fucking lazy. Like
Yeah.
is the big thing. I'm like, I was really thinking about this, and you do these like meditations of like why people act a certain way, and the motivation, the intrinsic motivation, usually stems from just absolute laziness. Is I don't want to do that. You know, I want to sit here and make other people do that for me, and it's just like I'm going to step on them.
Well, it's been like that since the beginning.
Dawn of
There's
time.
always been a percentage of people not pulling their weight.
Yes.
You look at these op-eds of like, why is this generation so lazy? We can trace those op-eds all the way back to the 18th century. Every generation has posed that question.
Yeah.
It's always been the same dynamic of people pulling their weight and people not pulling their weight.
Yeah,
Fair.
And,
Or at least the perception of it.
and that is fair, and I guess like we are blinded to our own generation, right? How many times do you hear, you know, back when it was hard, you know, my generation was the last hard generation, right?
Even millennials are starting to pull that
exactly,
BS.
yes.
Dudes, I'm 41. You guys are not. You guys look better than me, but you guys are probably not
Yeah, just turned
far
47.
behind.
I just take my
Yeah, well,
vitamins.
that doesn't surprise me the way I've treated my body. You guys take care of yourselves. But yeah, I mean, dudes my age, guys I served with, or dudes I grew up with, or whatever, they're starting to have those angry old guy Facebook posts.
Yeah.
And like, that's
Left my
all we
lawn.
ever got told was we sucked, and now you think you're different?
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
Well, and the millennial thing with the kids, the whole what is it? No, they call it something parenting.
Helicopter?
Helicopter parenting?
No, I don't know. Anyway, regardless, is what the type of parenting where we're just like, no, no, we're not going to say no to them. We're just going to let them, just let them be and let them feel. And now we have people that don't know how to.
They feel too much.
They don't know how to compartmentalize, and then,
Yeah.
and then which you do have to do as an adult. I'm sorry, like
No.
you have to compartmentalize.
Every human being at some point in their youth is gonna, for the most part, is going to come up against some sort of adversity. Some have it worse than others, no doubt.
Sure.
But every human being is going to have something that they have to learn to adjust around. And so if you take uncomfortability away from children, or if you take, problem solving away from them, they are going to grow up to be anxiety riddled,
Yeah.
suicidal. I mean, it's a problem with teenagers now,
There's
way
a-
more than when we were kids.
Absolutely.
There's an anxiety crisis happening, especially in this country.
Yeah.
And
They haven't learned to just work their way through things.
or the big thing that I see is people accepting who they are because of their traumas,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And this is my childhood trauma. Just accept me the way I am. No, it actually you have to
adjust to society.
Yeah.
But you have to go back. You have to peel the layers. You have to face those demons, if you will,
Yeah.
if you want to function in a stronger mentality from it. Otherwise, it's just going to defeat you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
this is just how I am.
You're accepting defeat at that point. Yeah.
Have you ever met, I mean, not to get too dark with this, like, have you ever met someone that had like a really effed up childhood, like
Yeah.
horrible poverty, physical, sexual abuse,
Yeah.
and they're like really, they're a little off, but everybody is, but they're for the most part very squared away people
Yeah.
that know how to handle themselves. And then you meet the person that like they grew up like how I did in like the suburbs, and my parents got divorced, and they're like 40, and they've never let go of that. I'm like,
yeah, but that
it's an excuse for all their bad behavior.
it is
It's resilience.
But we also see this in like we talk about this all the time is in what makes a good special operations warfighter. If you really go back,
Childhood trauma.
childhood trauma.
That's what those. I did a whole story on the Green Berets. I was at McCall for like 2 weeks or
Yeah.
a week. And a lot of them said it's like, oh yeah, there's a high number of people who grew up in broken homes coming through these.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's like 8 and 10, and then the other 2 they're just one-offs who had a decent life.
Yeah,
Beautiful family.
Yeah. You'll get the one outlier who's got this beautiful.
we call them Mormons.
Yeah, great family. Did really well.
Hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is funny.
No,
Yeah.
I think you're onto something though. Excuse me, still a little stuffy today.
Oh, you get that SHOT Show crud?
Do the SHOT Show sickness.
I want to write out a sketch where
Everyone's
we
got it.
finally invented a vaccine for it's specifically for whatever you get at SHOT Show.
Brought to you by
Does that
Pfizer.
happen
Yeah.
all the time?
Every time.
Oh yeah,
Every
it's
time?
If you go to SHOT Show, it's a thing.
It just must be my immunity is just much stronger than others.
'Cause you're
No,
resilient.
I'm just kidding. My resilience, my childhood trauma has made me so strong.
Constantly expose myself. Not in that way.
So
Not what I meant.
Yeah, and speaking of SHOT Show, like that comedy show, I have to say that was awesome.
That lineup, I had the easy job there. That lineup was phenomenal.
And
so
the last woman that went on, I know she wasn't in the service, but she was hilarious.
Christina Mariani.
Christina.
She's up. You'll see her at the mothership a lot. She opens for Theo Vaughn.
Oh, nice.
She is. You'll see her with a special within the next 5 years. She is phenomenal.
I guarantee it. She
Yeah.
was hilarious.
Yeah.
I was crying, laughing.
And that
show.
anxiety that she has on stage, I don't know her. I've only met her a few times, but the time I've spent with her off stage, I'm like, oh, that's real.
Yeah. This is very unique. SHOT Show was unique too. It was my first time going to it, and man,
Which is crazy, considering how.
I just say, I just never. I got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just never lined up. With
Well, you're a
this.
lucky man.
and I think that after going to that, I was like, there is like 5,000 vendors here, 5 floors. How do you navigate
It's
this? Can't even move.
So much, yeah.
It's too much.
And then everything that happens at night, the circle bar stuff and all that.
Always
I've been doing it for so long. At this point, I go out there and I do that show every year, and I go back to my hotel room and fly out the next. I saw you guys on the flight the next
Yeah.
morning. You guys were supposed to leave on Thursday, but you're like, we want to go now.
Yeah, it's time to go, man.
Yeah.
Beck, I just nothing happens good after midnight, right? And that show ended about that time, 11:30,
Yeah.
whatever. And sure as shit, everybody's going to the Circle Bar, and I'm like, time to go
It's
back.
just drunkenness and everybody kissing each other's asses and
Yeah, and you know what? My relationship has definitely changed with alcohol.
Right.
We talked about this at the beginning of the show. Is just alcohol. We are starting to see the science that this is absolute poison that we're putting. in
Oh,
our
yeah.
body, right. And
not just phically, it wears your brain down.
yeah, and you think you're charming, like you're
Right.
like I have like 1 or 2 drinks, and I'm like, yeah, I'm charming. I'm like, no, you're just being loud.
So many comedy movies have already done it, right? Where it shows the guy who thinks he's the coolest guy in the room, and it cuts to what he actually looks like, and he
Yes.
looks like a piece of
Dave
shit.
Chappelle does
Yeah.
a really good one of that.
Oh yeah. Walking into the club.
just
Yeah.
It's Always Sunny has that iconic one where they're at the high school reunion. If you guys remember that one, they think they're doing a dance scene.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah, synchronized dance.
They're just shit faced, like sweating.
Yeah.
their-
Or Wolf of Wall Street's a great one too.
Oh,
where-
yeah.
Oh, when he's on the Quaaludes.
I made it home just fine.
One of the funniest scenes ever, and then like everything's destroyed.
Not
Talk
a
about
scratch on the
something
car.
I'm jealous of boomers over. They were the last ones that really got to enjoy those. They're gone. They're extinct.
Yeah, they are.
My dad talked about doing Quaaludes, and my dad he was definitely a child of the 60s and 70s, and I never knew him as anything but like Mr. Reagan, Republican, squared away dad. But like he was apeshit before. He told me once that I did so much acid in the 60s that I'm surprised you and your sister weren't born with flashbacks. But my dad was
God.
talking about Quaaludes, and I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome.
Sounds great.
That is insane.
I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, not at all. Like that's what it's all about. Like, but I was thinking the other day. I was like, what is the future of drugs look like? right? Nowadays we have all these mushroom spirits and these like non-alcoholic beverages, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, there's some technology that they're using now. So there's what's the VR headsets like the Oculus. There's one that it's got headphones that it plays alternating like binaural beat frequencies, and it has a visual aspect to it. People are saying after about 10-12 minutes of being in it, you're in a full scale like acid level experience.
So you don't even have to put anything in your body anymore.
You don't even have to consume anything. You could just through the audio and visual frequencies that it's playing, it can put you into an advanced state, I guess. Very interesting.
That is extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've talked about this one before too. Is I mean, the brain is absolutely incredible, right? And if you could trick the brain, there's a whole bunch of things that could happen with it. So they were talking about this for anesthesia, putting patients with this virtual reality sim where they're playing essentially a snowball fight. And these patients who were utilizing burn victims, right, who were doing skin grafts, had this VR on, and they needed less medication, less anesthesia.
Really? Because their brain was
engaged in an activity. So, like, you trick the brain into, like, not focusing on that pain, you're focusing on something else, and then you have less medication. And it's pretty incredible, like,
wow,
what you could do for the brain. The brain is just, all it is an interpretation of the reality.
It's where those ghost pains come from. Everybody I know that's an amputee talks about, or that they can. I know a few
limb pain.
Phantom limb. That's it. Yeah. Or Omar.
Yeah.
He talks about when he uses his prosthetic to hit the gas pedal and brakes, but he feels the sensation of his foot doing that, even though it's a chunk of steel.
Yeah, and I get it too. It's like I'll get like an itch on my toe that doesn't exist.
Oh, it's insane, but it's real in your brain.
Yeah, and there's other tricks that you could do. When I was at the Center for the Intrepid, it was like mirror therapy. So you put this mirror in between your legs so you could see the reflection of your other foot, and then you scratch that other foot, and it effectively scratches the toesies that don't exist.
Oh my God!
You can do that, so you can reenact that even without missing a limb. So you need another person. If you put your hand up to another person, like your hands like this, you take your thumb and put it onto your middle finger, and you take your middle finger and rub it along their middle finger like this. You'll be able to feel it through your hand. It will trick your hand, your body the same exact way, and you'll both be able to feel like the internal sensation. So it tricks you exactly the same way.
Oh my God!
It's very interesting.
Yeah,
it's a wacky world we live in, and then you freaking throw in AI in the middle of it, and you're just like, so it's going to take some of the things that we're scratching the surface to and just skyrocket them. Yeah. You know?
Oh, you think AI will do that?
I do.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the psychology of AI. How does that work?
Well,
I'm more scared of it than anything.
Yeah, well, I think it's a tool that is going to be integrated within us, as opposed to like what you see in iRobot and all these things where they're taking our jobs and stuff.
Yeah, right.
No, it's going to emphasize who we are. It's going to be integrated into everything that we do. Like, for instance, like once we get out of this phase of utilizing it for cheat codes, we're going to be able to say, as a doctor, to research all this stuff and be able to cross-analyze all of this data that's out there, that takes hundreds and thousands of hours of time to research.
And probably dollars.
Yeah. It's gonna just skyrocket us and launch us light years ahead of where we're currently standing.
That it's good for me to hear that, because I only think of it from my profession, like the arts.
Yeah.
I understand why it is valuable, because now any Joe Schmo can create an amazing looking wide shot or establishing scene. It's going to make filmmaking and it's going to make things more democratic. It's going to make it easier it's going to lower the barrier for people to enter and make good stuff.
Well, but creativity is going to really take a hit from AI.
That's what scares me is, because really one of the only things that makes us truly uniquely human, that separates us from any other species, right? Us, like every other species, we want to fight each other, we want to bang each other, and We want to eat and shit, right? I mean, but look, what makes us human is like
The creative
the
element.
creative element of our
Yeah.
brains.
Yeah. I think there's going to be limitations though, because you're still going to have to put in a lot of time and effort and energy. Just because AI makes it a little bit easier doesn't mean it's solving all your problems for you. Even now, like you can do a single prompt on Sora and it's going to generate a really cool video, but it also might generate something completely fucked up and you're going to have to spend hours trying to like rein it back in.
And that's now, though.
Yeah,
but
that's now.
that is now. Give it 3 years.
This is what sorry, go ahead.
No,
yeah.
go, please.
This is what I've been using Grok for. Oh no, I hope I didn't delete them. I've been basically with Grok. All I've been doing is making images of famous historical people kissing each other. So I posted some of them on Twitter. I might have deleted them from my phone. I did like Pancho Villa kissing Napoleon. I did Hitler and Billy Bob Thornton kissing each other. Of course, it's not original by any means. I did a lot of Biden and Trump kissing each other. I did Jimi Hendrix kissing Queen Elizabeth II of Britain. Yeah.
Drake and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I did do a Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but not with Drake. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So random.
Yeah.
So this is a great example of an extended creativity, though. Is you are doing things, creative elements and creative pieces that you never would have done otherwise, right? You never would have had access to. So that's a great. It's a great point in that, people are so worried that their jobs are going to be taken away and all this stuff. Well, let's talk about the jobs that this is going to also bring into effect, as well. They're just going to find a balance. But creativity, in my opinion, is definitely going to take a hit. Let's look at architecture, for example, right? Is now look at the houses we make than 600 years ago, right?
Yeah.
100 years ago, we used to make these castles. So I think that's where it's going to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just changes things. The same thing with the internet. The internet came around and everyone was like, oh, there's so many jobs are going to disappear. And they did. But it also opened up a shit ton of other jobs, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to see the same thing.
They're all up in Austin right now.
Yeah, right?
Living on Lake Travis in those big ass houses.
Exactly, right?
Sucking the water out of that lake.
LBJ as well. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Bone dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. I want to kind of rewind it back a little bit to, we were talking about these generations of war, and we got to speak in a couple of weeks ago when we were at SHOT Show.
Yeah.
About
After the comedy show.
yeah, about your great great grandfather.
Yeah.
Who was in the Civil War and had written these letters that are incredible. And the way sorry to interrupt, but the way that you integrated that into the comedy show was just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Where you talk about the differences between how they used to speak and how you speak.
Yeah. My great great grandfather was in the Army of the Potomac pretty much for the entire duration of the war in all the big battles. I grew up. We had every single journal, every letter that he wrote home, muster rolls, all sorts of in this old chest.
That's cool.
And it really is what developed my love for history, was having access to this thing that most families don't. And I grew up reading these. Like, I knew these things very well. And so recently, part of some of the material I've been doing is I've been comparing my. By the way, he joined the Civil War when he was 15 years old. He's 19 when it ends. He's a captain, as a 19-year-old who's been through the worst battles for 4 years. This little boy went off to war, and you'd read these journals. It's just this amazing, amazing cursive handwriting with amazing alriculation of what he was experiencing. It's a weird thing when these these fat alpha dudes who are obsessed with being an alpha male and wearing their tough guy T-shirts. And they talk about how men aren't men anymore. Like, the men that fought that war back then were some of the most in tune with their feelings I've ever seen them. Those guys were so in tune with their feelings and what they were experiencing, and were willing to cry when they lost a friend.
Yeah.
Like, they were very, very in tune with themselves. And
I mean, well, they were boys.
They were boys. Yeah.
15 years old.
Yeah.
But expected to step up.
Yeah, and he did, and so lately I've been comparing his journal entries from some of the biggest days of the Civil War to my tweets as a 40-year-old man in 2024, whatever. And just that. I mean, do you want me to do one on?
Yes,
Here, I'll do one
I
on
know
the
you
air.
have some, and I was just going to ask. Let's please go through some of these.
The dichotomy is just, I mean, it is truly comedic brilliance.
Well,
It really is.
Have to give you the
But
props.
it's a slap in the face to how generations have changed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
On how we talk, and everything just gets into this kind of lazier fashion.
We don't write our name out unless it's for a signature. We don't handwrite anything anymore or anything.
I can't barely even write.
And he was like, the way that you would read them, it was so eloquently written too.
Oh my God.
It's beautiful and it's touching and it's emotional. You're like, man, this was a child writing these
Oh,
things
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So you know what happened? I think on that flight home, I was sitting next to you guys. Whenever I'm on a flight, that's when I start like clearing my phone out and everything like that. So hold up, let me do this real quick.
That's definitely not in your notes.
We'll just take some dead air here.
Oh yeah, here no. I mean, I can fill it in. I know all the lyrics to Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire."
We'll
put on a laugh track the whole time.
Full acapella at the same time.
Damn man, I'm sorry. You know what?
No. Continue to look for it.
It's definitely like it's definitely in here. But like, I mean, I can paraphrase him, right?
Yeah.
This was April 3rd, the day after the breakthrough at Petersburg, which he was instrumental in. He was one of the first Union soldiers to break through the Confederate lines, like him individually. And you know, he was talking about, you know, we took the parapet, and he's using all the lingo of the day, and he's talking about his friend Ed Brownlee, who he'd been in the entire war with. And he's literally talking to Ed in his journal entries, like, "Oh Ed, how I hit my pillow and cried thinking of you," and you know, so very detailed language. And then I'm not doing it any justice by not reading it verbatim, but then I would read this very heartfelt journal entry from this little boy, and then it cut to go, "All right, this is me in 2025. By the way, I'm 40 years old." Here, what did I say? Oh yeah, please do dry fire drills at my forehead. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the eloquent speech that you're talking about now.
He did a journal entry about on April 9th, the day that Lee surrendered. He was manning post somewhere in like near Appomattox where the surrender happened.
Okay.
And he was talking about seeing all the women's boarding house and all the young ladies there, and talking about how beautiful they were, and how he can't wait for the war to end and find a wife, and he literally wrote, "I'm bound for an education, and I shall have one." Right? Beautiful, right?
Yeah, I'm bound.
And then it just cuts to, "I did the math, and it's entirely possible that I was conceived while my parents were watching the premiere episode of Fraggle Rock."
It is so true. But, you know, I'm also, you think about it too. We talk about this generations. It's kind of been a hot button topic that we're talking about. And let's just like bring it back to the 1800s, if you will. Like to deliver mail, like via Pony Express, you know how long that would take? Like imagine sending
through war zones.
A text and it's like, in 2 weeks, like 2 weeks from now, that letter's going to get delivered. It's going to take 2 weeks to get back. You know, like half the state. It's not even like across the country. So I often think, like, while they're sitting by the campfire, what is going on in their head? We have pings and dings.
Oh, as soon as you were a ranger, you guys would go do a hit and kill a bunch of dudes and be back to your PlayStations.
In a matter of
playing
moments.
Call of Duty, like same night. Yeah, it is. So that stimulus, you know, that you get is constant nowadays, and no wonder why you have anxiety, because people get back to you and they're like, why are you taking 5 hours to get back to my email? And I always get back to like bitch, it used to take 4 weeks via
Right.
Pony Express.
Yeah.
You're lucky I'm getting back to you, So
That guy who likes to write you an email at 3 p.m. on a Friday and be like, why didn't you get back to me?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Monday morning.
That's pretty much how I'm going to set up. You could schedule send, and I'm just going to start doing that to people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is. It's ridiculous how on and plugged in you have to be all the time. No wonder why you have anxiety.
Yeah.
And then now they're saying like the blue lights and the screens that you're staring at are cooking your brain.
Yeah. Like literally frying it.
Which is true. I mean, there's an old saying about distance making the heart grow fonder, right? You ever hear that saying? Yeah, distance makes the heart grow fonder, or fan the flame type thing.
Yeah.
I think there might be some sort of relative truth there that we're kind of missing out on the daily.
Have you guys ever dropped your phone in the toilet or your phone gets deadlined for whatever reason?
Yeah.
And
You get 2 days of freedom.
and 2 day the first like 4 to everyone's different, but let's say the first 8 hours you're like, oh shit, you got to watch TV. And then it's like you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, this is freedom. And the only reason you go and get that thing fixed is you have like work emails to attend to.
Yeah.
But like with the Facebooks, with all the social media stuff and the games and all that, you realize very quickly, like, I don't need any of this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
once a year, I do like just a social, get rid of social media for a month.
Oh, wow.
Usually like June, July. So I take off just 30
The
days.
fun months.
Well, yeah. But so I do something specific, and like anytime I bring it up to people, I always tell them to do the same exact thing. So just log out of it on your phone and see instinctively how many times you'll go from a text message and you'll swipe over and try to open Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, Twitter if you're on that. Instinctively, you will just go over to it, and since it's a login screen, it'll prompt it and it'll break that immediately. You'll be like, oh shit, I did it again. And like by day 2, you'll have done it like 20 or 30 times, and you'll be like, I'm a piece of shit. You will just realize like, oh, I am so deeply addicted to this.
Well,
and like I see so many, I'm very guilty of the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Very guilty.
It's hard not to be.
Well, I also have a time limit set on. There's a time limit on the iPhone. If you don't know this,
I didn't.
You can set yourself to like whatever time amount you
An
want
hour?
a day.
Yeah.
So I have mine set collectively to an hour a day. So across any sort of social or entertainment platforms,
You can focus on work.
yeah,
You can.
Yeah.
I get
And
1 hour. Yeah.
One of the things that I do too is I take it away from the search bar in Apple. So when you scroll down and you search it, you can't do that. So I have to go into a separate folder that's like 3 pages deep to go onto my Instagram.
Yeah.
So I actively have to go
Make it
through
inconvenient.
steps.
Yeah.
It's so inconvenient. Yeah, and then I put the timer on that, and then you realize. So I think 2024. We were talking about a trajectory of 1/3 of your time awake is on your phone. It is an average of 5 to 6 hours a day.
How much of that time is non-work time? Because I understand we have to be on our phones for work. A lot of us do.
Yeah.
So how much of that is like social media and other like useless things?
Oh, and I don't have the actual statistics for that, but it's substantial.
I would imagine.
I mean, that's what a lot of people doing. And two, we talk about negative feedback loops, why people are going onto Instagram even more and stuff during work. And that as that anxiety goes up and that work increases, and you find comfort in the social media,
Right.
and the doom scrolling.
Yeah.
That's where that happens. And how many times have you been stuck like doom scrolling? You're like, I've been on the toilet for 20 minutes. So I was done 15 minutes
yeah.
ago.
It happens.
I can't stand up either. Yeah,
I got to wipe.
because
gonna
my
dry
leg
up.
fell asleep. I'm in a vicious cycle here.
Let me just go back to
Yeah.
scrolling. So
Yeah.
stop.
But
thinking
that being
about
said,
this.
we talk about the differences, right? We also have to talk about the pros as well. And I think the difference in older generations and modern generations is our ability to process and multitask is exponentially higher.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen a 3-year-old kid on a phone? Give it a 1-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And they're like taking pictures and taking selfies and all this stuff.
My nephews are 7, and they know what to do on those on the pads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it translates though. Is that ability to process and multitask translates. Now you see 2-year-olds snowboarding and skiing. 2-year-olds. What?
Yeah.
60 years ago, did you see that?
Yeah.
Never.
Well, a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Are you guys football fans? Do you know who Patrick Mahomes?
It was a hell of a season.
Yeah. There you go.
I don't know. I don't know anything about
Patrick Mahomes.
Football.
Patrick Mahomes is a physically freak of a quarterback.
Sure.
Who does things that nobody's ever done. The way, the angles that he throws the ball, the way he can maneuver around the field and throw the ball on the move, it's not natural, right? Well, they call it the Madden effect. So what you're seeing now is you have a historically in football, quarterback drops back, they stay in the pocket, they throw the ball. Sometimes they might have to do a little running, but you have now a guy like Patrick Mahomes. They call him the joystick, but they call it the Madden effect. So because you have a generation of these football players who grew up playing this Madden football game, this video game, where in the video game you could make those weird throws and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it actually molded into how they physically play the game of football. The video game affected how they actually now maneuver on the field.
So interesting.
That's a great point. Is right, these simulations. Nowadays, you're going to be able to go into these VR rooms and have full combat experiences without ever being to combat. You have Olympic athletes who are utilizing technologies on these treadmill snow plates, right? So you're you're skydiving in sky tunnels, right? So now you have these simulation hours, these much more cost-effective ways to train you for actual real-world scenarios.
Yeah.
So same thing with the video games. Yeah, that's a great example.
Now, there's a great nursing and surgeon simulator where they have so it's AI. AI is your patient, and you got your Oculus on, and so you can give them all sorts of drugs. I mean, you are basically a nurse, and the AI is talking to you like it's a patient. It has desires and wants, and like, hey, I really don't like medication. So I've seen some great videos where people are fucking with the AI. It's like
shoving pills in their mouth.
Yeah, you're just like giving them a handful of pills, or just drawing 30 different things into a single syringe.
Yeah.
There's fun with it, but what a great training simulator where you can like get live feedback and like, hey, this is what happens if you give somebody who's allergic to something, like it's going to play it out in real time. Like he's allergic to this, and immediate like anaphylaxis, right? I think the training that it offers is also phenomenal.
For everybody, for every industry.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, we've seen this with flight simulators for years, but nowadays they're so realistic that you could be a better pilot than someone who was a pilot.
You as a 10-year-old could already have a base and breeze through flight school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there was actually a guy who did that last year, built a 747, 737, whatever, commercial plane simulator in his basement. Built it from scratch himself and had logged so many hours that they brought him in. It was Southwest. It was a Southwest plane.
Okay.
And they let him fly the plane. And he was able to do it. No problem.
Holy
crazy.
moly.
I mean,
there are factors. There are factors there, though. It's like feeling extreme turbulence in a simulator and in real life have got to still be different things, even though pilots are trained to handle that.
There is a seat of the pants type thing, and I think that applies to a multitude of different areas, right? Even on the surgery side or on the medical side. Like, you still have to be able to grab somebody's arm and inject them, or you have to be able to cut through the skin and the muscle.
Stitches are a great example. Is in theory and on practice, stitches
very different,
very easy. When there is oozing blood and blood pouring out of the wound, it's very difficult,
fighting,
right? And then on that you got the patient jerking and passing out. So all these other elements too. That goes to everything that we learned in the military, right? Train harder than you fight.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true. Yeah. I think it's opening up some pretty cool avenues, though.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm less scared than I am excited. I think it's gonna,
that's good.
Yeah, I think it's gonna offer some fun stuff.
I don't know which way. I think my fear only really came on the creative side because I'm selfish like that, and I don't pay attention to the rest of humanity. But no, it's good. I'm glad to hear these perspectives to ease my mind a bit.
Consider this for the creative side. So I think in a couple of years we're starting to see quantum computing, right? Incredibly powerful computing that will eventually make its way into the commercial realm. 10, 15, maybe 20 years from now. AI, on the other hand, is going at a much faster rate, and it's not going to take a whole lot of computational power, but from the creative side, imagine you can sit down to watch some TV tonight or watch a movie tonight, and you get to tell the AI what you want to see. I want to watch Band of Brothers with the lead as Buzz Lightyear, right? And it's going to generate 10 episodes at an hour each, and it's going to it's going to be so good in a couple of years. It's going to be one solid like season of Band of Brothers led by Buzz Lightyear for you.
Yeah.
And you get to watch that, and it's going to do a great job. Or video games, the exact same thing. I want to play Grand Theft Auto, but with X, Y, and Z characteristics.
Isn't
And this
Grand
type of
Theft
game-
Auto the new one that's coming out? They're already implementing AI into that.
Yeah, so all
Yes.
the NPCs apparently are AI enabled, which means like you can just stop and chat with them. It will create different in-game
Gnarly.
effects. The police are AI, which means like they'll have a normal response as opposed to just getting out of the car and shooting you.
4 stars.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're not, in past video games, we used to watch them, right? They'd go on the same path, right? And they'd do the same loop.
Yep.
Right.
There's none of that anymore. So, but I mean, you're seeing this with like Hell Let Loose. Have you seen this video game? Hell Let Loose is a World War II simulator. And it like you incorporate an Unreal Engine 6 to that. Now you have realistic warfare. Yeah, you have VR with that.
Yeah.
Jesus. So now, what are the mental implications to some of these things that are coming out, right? If I could step into, which we have 360 treadmills, we have impact suits, we have the Ready Player One already. In the next couple of years, it'll be extensive. But you imagine that is if I step into a world-time environment, and then I see everybody get blown up, right? I mean, there is a psychological response,
Yeah.
even though we know it's not real, right?
Yeah.
Traumas are happening. We see this all the time.
I've heard discussions about how the GWAT generation, it was way easier. And again, we talk about, how much better and tougher the previous generations were. There was a big problem in World War II and Vietnam of not everybody was trying to kill the enemy. They could not get past that mental block. They might be firing their weapons, but they're aiming high, right?
Yeah.
Because they can't bring themselves to take another life. Where the GWAT generation, because they grew up on Grand Theft Auto and more, violent media and everything like that, it was an easier generation to convince to kill people.
Desensitization, right?
Volunteer versus select,
That plays a huge factor.
Conscription.
In it. Yeah.
So Civil War, now that we've been speaking about that too, is there is stories of rifles found with multiple musket balls
still
in.
Yeah.
Loaded,
So
yeah.
meaning that instead of firing, they were
doing
reloading.
the act.
They were doing
Yeah.
the act, so their whole barrels were full of musket rounds.
Yeah.
And because of that very reason. So we talk about the viciousness of that too, but there is people that refuse to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
And they're not cowards. It's a weird mental
They're
block
brothers.
that the military at the time could never identify that was happening. Now they put a lot of effort into breaking down that mental block. Yeah.
true story. Yeah, I guess that's too. That is true. It's just breaking down that mental block.
Back
But-
then they're just like, we'll just train them how to shoot, and they'll shoot people.
I mean, and now we know for a fact that there's entire departments within the CIA on how to affect Hollywood and movies, and you know what I mean.
That relationship has always been incestuous. People have this thing with big liberal Hollywood with its agenda. Yeah, its agenda is working for the DOD.
It is.
They're constantly doing recruiting commercials for the DOD.
It's to train you more and I talk about this all the time with Marvel being an example of this. Is Marvel, look what they do. Morality and ethics are implemented into every aspect of those movies.
Yeah.
And what all it is it's training you a certain way. If I didn't have parents or TV or all of this stuff, I would probably not walk on 2 feet. I would probably be crawling around.
Yeah.
Right. So even these innate things and behaviors that we think are just natural, the natural inclination of humanity, it's not true.
No.
So yeah, anyway, that's a rant for another day, I'm sure.
I think it's accurate.
The DOD and I don't know much about the CIA relationship. That's interesting.
So you know that in 2016, the Obama administration lifted the propaganda ban on the United States via the CIA. So in the late 70s, mid 70s, I think it was like 76 or 77, they had a propaganda ban where the CIA was not allowed to utilize propaganda.
I think that's very healthy.
Yeah, 2016 got lifted. So since 2016, it's been allowed.
Oh, wow.
And there's no
No one's talking about it.
Here's the freedom of information about it because
and that's what people don't realize
ultra classified.
with the big the big studio industry, movie industry is like it's all about funding. It's all about money. They don't have some sort of moral code, a liberal moral code or whatever. They will, if the CIA is like, we'll give you money to make a movie, everyone's like, yeah, let's make a movie.
Or that's the reason we also see major restrictions on movies because China's like, we don't like that.
Oh, yeah. That's why
we don't like that.
Every 6 months you have some like A-list American movie star apologizing because he said something slightly negative about China.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So because that's where 50% of the revenue is coming from. Yeah.
Another example is this, and us three have been in the media, on the media side of things, and the behind the scenes, behind the cameras aspect of things, documentaries, right? Very easy to guide the audience.
Especially for like the like Netflix.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Like and you could name 100 on Netflix that the Scott Peterson trial, all this stuff.
The Menendez brothers.
Yeah, like we could paint a way to make even the guiltiest people look innocent.
Yeah, that's the thing that, and this goes back pre-millennial era. I mean, the Birdman of Alcatraz was a popular movie in the early '60s, right?
Yeah.
Hollywood painted him as this poor old guy with his birds in his prison cell, and like there was these big petitions from after the movie came out to release him, and everyone's like, he murdered like 7 people. No.
He's
a murderer.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we know that it's very easy to manipulate someone.
Yeah.
Manipulate the viewer, right?
And I would imagine a lot of the time the film industry is not even a lot of the time isn't even they're not doing it intentionally. There's no agenda. It's just the way you write a story. Like what's gonna captivate the audience here.
Also there's Hollywooding things, right?
Yeah.
We all know that there's Hollywooding in movies, so it's necessary to make a good film at the same time.
Yeah.
So, speaking of documentaries, you are working on a history documentary. I just wanted to kind of close out with what you're currently working on now.
A history documentary?
Or the history, getting these stories in and stuff like that. So where are these at?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do them for some other people, but most of them I do for Black Rifle. It's a weird thing. It's a coffee company, but there's a media wing.
Yes.
And we make these documentaries where we're not hawking our product. There's no subliminal messaging about coffee in there. It's like, no, the coffee that we sell is funding our opportunity to tell just stories about great Americans and great people or interesting stories. So I've had the pleasure the last couple of years of producing, being behind the camera and producing some of these documentaries about, I did a big one on Normandy, released about 6 months ago. Did one on the one I'm very proud of is on the Battle of Fallujah that came out in November. That was about an hour and 45 minutes. Interviewed a lot of World War II veterans. I got to do something about a bunch of OH-6 pilots from Vietnam, and that was honestly one of the coolest things. Like out of all the Vietnam movies they make, it's typically about like infantry and stuff like that. But like, oh man, that would be such a cool movie to see. Is about those early OH-6 pilots. Like, all the SOAR guys now and everything, they have those insane renegade. Like it was just crazy back in Vietnam. And he's like, it's like you had pretty good scores. Yeah, you're 19. Yeah. You want to be a helicopter pilot? Yeah.
Well, that and the stories of them like fueling up to the brim with fuel and ammo, and they wouldn't even be able to hop over the fence getting out of the gate. Like they would have to hop the helicopter, a couple of times to get over the fence.
They'd fly those things at 3 feet off the ground.
Yeah. Because they was too heavy to take off. They're like, well, we'll just fly around like this for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys doing? Craziness.
And I interviewed one guy who his helicopter was shot down. His OH-6 was shot down 3 times in one day. The first time it was shot down was in a heavy engagement. They were shaped like an egg, right? So everything but the hull would break off. So if you were flying low enough, you were going to be okay.
Yeah.
He crash lands, the plane breaks apart, he climbs out of the egg and gets picked up, taken back to the base. He's given a new a helicopter, hops in that, Same crew, same gunner, crew chief in the back. Goes off on another mission, gets shot down, gets picked
Holy
up,
shit.
goes back to base. They give him another helicopter. Goes back out, and after the third time getting shot down, the day was done.
It's like nighttime.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
But imagine if that's the norm. That's the norm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, just take another helicopter.
He talked about it so nonchalantly. I'm like, you'd get a Medal of Honor in 2025 for that.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you would not be allowed on another helicopter for months.
yeah, that's right. The aviation world has changed.
Yeah, it's a little different now. They've
gotta
been
be
like,
an investigation.
You crashed, you're done. You're out of here.
Investigation. Yeah, that's nuts, man. Well,
Yeah.
it's always good talking to you, brother.
Thank you.
We always have a good time. We got to have you back on more so we can just shoot.
I
the shit.
appreciate, after the next pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Hopefully
not.
there's
Okay,
not
all right.
another one of those.
Not 3 more years.
Can I plug my side gig?
Absolutely.
I started a YouTube channel that does history stories.
Yes.
It's called Jacked History, Jacked History, and it's really lighthearted stuff. It's like the conversation we're having here today. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm not trying to be a history professor. It's like 15 to 20 minutes of this is some cool things that happened you might not know about, and I'm going to insert my own dick and fart jokes in there, and
perfect.
hope you have something fun to tell your buddies at the bar later.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's like. Did you ever watch Drunk History?
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
Hilarious.
That was so great.
Yeah.
And you just hear these wacky things and the perspective they give you. It makes it much more digestible and fun.
And the thing is, too, they're drunk and they get little things wrong here and there. But for the most part, they're telling you what actually happened.
That's the best
so
part is
good.
when they are a little bit incorrect.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Jacked History, though, obviously a good name. You've always got the good names. I was looking at your hat, too, softcore history.
Although, yeah, those are my buddies up in Austin. Well, it's not Jacked History because I'm like buff jacked. It's Jacked History because it's
Jacked.
It's jacked. It's wild. Yeah.
It's Jack
It's a
Mandaville.
little jacked up.
Yeah. It's a little jacked up.
It's also
yeah.
my name.
Yeah, it's my name. And then I had to infuse that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time, Mr. Jack.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you inviting me out here. to
Heck
do that.
yeah, we're going to do it again soon.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, all right. Well, this has been the Medevac podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot for joining today. If you want to go check out Jack Mandaville's new series, Jacked History, I'm sure there'll be a link in there if we can convince our producer to do that. Anyways, we'll see you guys
Oh,
next
who's
week.
your producer? Dave?
Dave
Dave
Reardon.
Reardon.
We're going to dime him out.
Yeah, Dave does my thumbnails. He better put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Dave, this message is for you. All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.